Hi, welcome to lecture number 24 in TEFL course. In this lecture, we are going to talk about self-reflection. Um, um, you have previous idea about self-reflection and how self-reflection gives teacher opportunities to think deeply, systematically, and critically on their own performance, as well as that of their students during specific practices in specific lesson. Doing reflection is important because it develops teaching practices and develops the final outcome of the teaching. So it develops students' achievement. In this lecture, we are going to talk about different topics. First of all, you have to know the definition of reflection, then the benefits for doing reflection after each lesson. So why do you need to do reflection by the end of each lesson? There are four criteria of reflection, and you have to know the relation between ELC and reflection, the steps, the questions of ELC, how to do reflection. So you have to know simple ELC form of reflection. So you have to know how to answer specific questions during doing the reflection in order to achieve the aim of doing self-reflection by the end of each lesson. So, by the end of this lecture, you have to be able to define reflection or self-reflection. You should be able to talk about in ELC, and can we consider a self-reflection as a strategy for self-development? Why? When the teacher can write the reflection, do you think the teacher have to write the reflection before or after the lesson or during the lesson? And you have to say why. Or the teacher should write three reflections after, before, and during the lesson. So please, during this lecture, try to find answers for these questions. Definition of reflection. Reflection is the teacher's deep critical thinking of his or her and the student's performance after passing an experience by following specific stages: feeling, description, analysis, generalization, theory, and plan action. So the teacher has to think critically and deeply in his or her action steps, procedures, and the students' reactions, actions during the lesson. The steps she or he planned and followed during the lesson. Students' achievement, students' cooperation, participation, and all practices during the lesson. Why? In order to develop his or her teaching competencies, teaching practices, and develop a student's achievement level. But reflection has to follow different stages. It starts from talking about teachers' feeling at the beginning, during, and at the end of the lesson. Description, describing different things, different points, evidence, and analyzing the points, things help and hinder students learning during the lesson. Generalization and theory. So by the end, the teacher should reach theory and generalization to consider during his or her teaching, during his and her different practices in the classes, and plan action or put different action points for next practices. Uh, so by the end of the reflection, the teacher should point out 2 points. One,
good point, one strength point, and one weakness point. 1 point went well and 1 point didn't go well during his or her lesson in order to develop his or her practices next lecture, next lesson, by consider the same point that went well during his or her lesson and develop change the point that didn't go well during her or her practices. Benefits for doing reflection. There are a lot of benefits for doing reflection. Here are five of them, and you can add more. Or you can change one of these benefits and add another one. Uh, the first one, it provides the teacher with a method of obtaining feedback for their teaching practice. So, by doing self-reflection, you can provide yourself with suitable feedback in your teaching practices during a lesson. Or you can discuss your self-reflection with your best friend in order to receive suitable feedback in your teaching practice. Or you can discuss the self-reflection with your supervisor in order to receive also suitable or sufficient feedback in your teaching practices during a specific lesson. It is a way for continual professional self-development. Yes, by doing self-reflection, you can know, you can reach the strength practices and weaknesses ones. So you can draw action plans to enhance your strength, your good practices that help students learning, and change practices that hinder students learning. It is a strategy for lifelong learning to develop your own practices. How? When you see or when you reach negative practices that hinder students learning, so you can ask your best friend, supervisor, you can ask different resources, contact with different resources in order to change these weak practices with strength one, to know different ways, different activities, different steps, different procedures you can adapt or use in order to develop your teaching practices, so develop students' achievement level. It motivates the teacher to self-process, self-study, critical thinking, systematic understanding, creation of a new knowledge, and to learn the effective methods work and how the teacher could improve these methods. Again, it's similar for the previous one, lifelong learning. So you have to you have to criticize your practices. You have to think of your practices. Which one helps students learning and which one hinders students learning? Why? Why these steps hinder students learning or help them? So you have to study your practices during the lessons, students' reaction also during the lesson, in order to understand yourself more and understand your practices more and deeply. Uh, and you have to see other teacher practices, ask your best friend, supervisor, read different materials, different references, teaching English as a foreign language references or methodology box in order to develop your practices, in order to improve your teaching methods, your teaching competences. So it is a way for lifelong learning and it is a way for continual development. So you have to train yourself to do reflection after each lesson. It raises the urgent needs for encouraging all teachers to adopt it as one of the most vital strategies for self-professional development and lifelong learning. Why? Because you use different resources in order to change your weaknesses points by good ones, by methods, steps, procedures, activities, ways for giving instructions, ways for dealing with the students' answers, ways for managing time, managing students, managing materials during the lesson in order to develop a student's achievement level, in order to develop your practices, in order to change the weaknesses practices by good ones. ELC and reflection. So first of all, what is ELC? It is experiential learning cycle. So you have to pass an experience. Then after that, you have to reflect on this experience by following systematic steps, by answering specific questions. First of all, you have to talk about your feeling. Then after that, you have to talk about the objective. If you students achieve the objective of the lesson, how do you know? You have to provide evidence for this. For your answer, if your students achieve the objective completely, partially, or not at all. Then after that, you have to mention one significant point, one point that went well, one point that helped students learning, and why. The fourth question, you have to mention one point that didn't go well, one point that hindered students learning during the lesson, and you have to say why. By the end, you have to draw your action plan for next practices. You have to mention 2 points you will consider in the next practice, in the next lesson. If you want to do the same lesson next time, what are the changes you are going to consider during teaching? So reflection is not a separate term that student stand alone. It consists of a combination of stages integrated into one another, and each one leads to another one. Beside these terms are processes, and each process has its own statements that teachers have to reach to achieve reflection successfully. Reflection within experiential learning cycle stages is a scaffolding process. The teacher builds upon each process to reach an action plan. You have to talk about your feeling, describing things. You have to analyzing steps, actions, and you have to reach the action plan. Specific points you have to consider next teaching practices. Kolb ELC is building the reflection form questions because it enables teachers to answer specific, clear questions with providing accurate evidence for each answer. So you have to follow a form in order to write a good reflection, a good self-reflection, by answering specific questions, and you have to provide each answer with accurate evidence. Simple ELC form of reflection. It is a form for doing reflection, and you have to follow the same form in your practicum course next semester, inshallah. So you have to follow the same answers. You have to answer these questions in order to complete your reflection. It starts talking about your feeling and ends with talking about action points, things you are going, or practices you are going to change next teaching time. The first question, how do you feel? Why do you say that? You will start your lesson with a specific feeling, then your feeling will change during the lesson. Then by the end of the lesson, your feeling may change, or you have the same feelings. So to answer this question, you have to talk about your feeling at the beginning of the lesson and to say why you felt happy. Why? Because for example, I prepared different material, I planned my lesson well, and during the lesson, how do you feel? Why? And by the end of the lesson, and you have to say why. So your feeling at the beginning, during, and at the end of the lesson, and say why for each one. Did you achieve your objective, or did the students meet the objective or achieve the objective of the lesson? How do you know? Mention a specific one thing. For example, you can say, yes, students achieved the objective of the lesson completely, partially, not at all. And you have to say why. How do you know? You have to mention a specific one thing. For example, you can talk about during a stage or one activity of the during stage for PDP lessons, or you can talk about production stage in a grammar speaking lesson, or you can talk about the final draft stage in a writing lesson. Why? Because the objectives achieved in these stages for PDP lessons, the objective achieved or is achieved in during stage. PPP framework, the objective is achieved in production stage. For writing, the objective is achieved in final draft stage, in writing the final draft stage. So you have to talk about these stages if you would like to talk about your objective, if students achieve the objective of the lesson or not, if students meet the objective of the lesson or not. Identify one significant moment that went well. Write a few words to identify it and say why it went well. What helped students learning in that moment. So you, in this question, you have to talk about one thing that went well during your lesson and say why. Give more description. What did you do and what the students do at the same time. Why? For example, giving instructions help students learning or help students to achieve or answer this activity successfully, or why you do specific step, specific thing with the students, and students did well in this step. The fourth one is the opposite. Identify one significant part of the lesson that didn't seem to go well. Write a few words to identify it and say why it didn't go well. What hindered students learning in that moment. Here in this question, you have to mention one thing that didn't go well during your lesson and say why. Give more description. And you can talk about a specific student. You can talk about you, yourself, a group of students, a pair of students, their reaction, their performance during this activity or this point. You have to say why. What things hinder students learning in this activity, in this step, in this procedure. The last question in reflection form, what changes are you going to do next time? If you do the same lesson, mention 2 points only based on your answer or answers for questions 3 and 4. Question 3 talks about one thing went well, but question 4 talks about one thing that didn't go well. So, for answering question number 5, you have to say 1 point as a strength point that you are going to do it one more time next teaching practice based on your answer on any question number 3. For example, if you talked about giving examples, so you giving instructions or writing more than one example, so you have here to write about next lesson I'm going to write more examples in order to help students to elicit the rule out of these examples. This is the first point for question 5. The second one, if you talked about giving instructions as one point that didn't go well, as one point that hinders students learning, so you have to draw action point for next time. Next time, I'm going to give clear instructions by using short sentences, simple language, using ICQs, and do the first one as a model for students. So by doing this, you give clear answer for question 5. So it is a cycle, as you can see. First, talking about your feeling about the lesson, then objective. After that, one thing went well, one thing didn't go well, and action points based on your answers for question 3 and 4. All these answers based on your experience, your teaching practices in the lesson. So you have to do a reflection by the end of each lesson in order to develop your teaching competencies, in order to develop students' achievement level, in order to develop your next teaching, in order to write clear action points for next lesson plan and consider these action points during your teaching. This is the end of this lecture. Thank you for your listening.